Fallout New Vegas may force you into a blatant narrative and plot direction, but one of the nightmares that will always stay with me was the massacre at Nipton. I'm Mark from Untitled Dissection. I make Fallout lore videos, and today we take a closer look at Nipton, the settlement that was literally wiped off the map. Perhaps you don't remember your first experiences getting into Fallout New Vegas. After all, for many of us, that's over 15 years ago. Not exactly easy to recall. In my earliest memories with the game, however, I traded a fairly safe and highly capable character from Fallout 3 for a new paradigm where I frankly wasn't well equipped to successfully design a true RPG-style character. So instead of focusing too hard on that, I reverted to someone obsessed with safety and what was familiar, which involved finding what recognizable roads were left and choosing to follow them. It's not exactly unique to my playthrough. The game was intended to take you south of Good Springs and follow a less Cazador and Deathclaw-ridden journey to the south. For the risk-averse, this takes you into a relatively quiet area of the Mojave Wasteland. That is, until you notice smokestacks rising in the sky while crossing the southern region of the map. The smoke is an oddity across this landscape, but the mystery of why it's there won't take long to discover. The road signs and locales all point towards this heap of civilization being the former town of Nipton. But what exactly happened here? Strap in, it's about to get messy. Previous to the time before Fallout's bombs fell, the small town of Nipton was originally created on February 9, 1905. Its legacy was tied to being a stop on the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad, originally being referred to as the Nipino Camp. The railroad's involvement gave this camp an identity, as it became a hub of sorts for the surrounding area, serving local mining operations and ranches that were near to it. It'd go on to become a tourist locale as well in the following generations, as it would become an RV stop and a destination for travelers to rest and set up tents on their way through the region. Its unique positioning on the California-Nevada border would allow it to participate in the California State Lottery, as Nevada has no lottery of its own, providing a chance for those in the area to still participate in such an industry. Fortunately for much of New Vegas, it would not be hit by nuclear bombs as so many other areas of the former United States had suffered, largely due to a missile defense system owned and operated by Robert Edwin House. And while locations like Nipton were reduced to ash in other regions, here, this location remains untouched by the Great War. However, despite the nature of the town being kept safe from nuclear bombs, the same cannot be said for the seedy underbelly that would overtake the town in its humble beginnings. The 23rd century brought a completely different profile for the once simplistic town of Nipton, one that represented unsavory practices and a less than reputable head of leadership. Joseph B. Steyn became Nipton's mayor at an unknown point, a character who is only mentioned in New Vegas, but one that has left his stamp on this town, the majority of which can't be possibly misconstrued as good. Steyn's journey, however, started in the Hub, one of the largest post-war trading settlements in New California. His arrival in Nipton marked the beginning of what was supposed to be a 1 or 2 year stay, but took on an identity of several odd decisions. One of the few potential good deeds you could align with Steyn was employing a technical wizard by the name of Tony the Tinker, a particularly gifted technologist that the mayor brought in to restore certain functions to Nipton's infrastructure. Steyn unpopularly did this given Tony's reputation amongst Nipton's locals, who felt that he was an oddball and a freak in the small community. Despite the feelings amongst his constituents, Steyn had Tony restore the capabilities of computer terminals, several Mr. Gutsy robots, and odd jobs amongst the town. While Tony's involvement was debated upon by the Nipton populace, the true purpose of the location was to take advantage of the new California Republic soldiers as a rest and relaxation spot for them to spend their caps. Shops were available to provide food and general services to soldiers and visitors alike, but outside of this lived questionable prostitution services, ones that attracted soldiers directly from the Mojave outpost to the west. Mayor Steyn relied on 2 individuals named Rosie and Sylvia to service the many clients of the area, taking a 15% cut in their business as well as the others located in Nipton. Steyn had built himself a renewable income of sorts based on the insatiable needs of the NCR's ranks, and eventually it would be the town's undoing. A growing sense of greed found opportunities when Steyn received word that the NCR correctional facility north of Nipton was overthrown by its prisoners. This situation was one that the mayor planned to take full advantage of. The escaped prisoners, otherwise known as the Powder Gangers, quickly began causing trouble for the surrounding areas of New Vegas. But rather than see an obstacle, Steyn decided to extend them an olive branch. Steyn documented this event in a personal note, recalling how they established contact with the Powdergangers to allow them access to the town's services.
A promising development, if I do say so myself. It seems things went to hell at the NCR Correctional Facility north of here, and escaped prisoners are roaming free. It sounds like a bad thing, and would be, if not for the political acumen and interpersonal alchemy of yours truly, Mayor Joseph B. Steyn, Esquire. I sent the Jims out to make contact with the prisoners, or Powdergangers rather, they insist on this name, to let them know Nipton's open for trade, with free turns with the girls as door prizes. Ha! You know they went for that deal. As sold by Little Jim, anyway. Big Jim, rest in peace. I see a lot of potential here, so long as I can keep the NCR troops and Powders, ridiculous name, from running into each other and shooting it out in the streets.
To delve into the mind of Steyn for a moment, his elation at the accepted terms from the Powdergangers trumps the loss of one of his messengers sent to speak to them. The messengers were two brothers named Little Jim and Big Jim, and while Little Jim's message was clearly accepted, Big Jim didn't leave the NCR Correctional Facility with his life. Regardless, Mayor Steyn was already thinking past his slight hiccup to the plans, and instead had planned ways that he could ensure that the NCR soldiers and the recently liberated Powdergangers wouldn't clash. For he had a vested interest in keeping the parties separated at all costs, and decided to let the Powdergangers use Nipton services during the day, while only having the NCR soldiers visit them during the evening, which was already a consistent time for the NCR's usage of the town. Allowing both parties to utilize the same location strategically like this was a calculated risk, but one that Steyn was willing to leverage in search of more financial gain. It would seem that at least temporarily, that his small empire would remain fruitful despite the risks. With the strategic vision in place to make Nipton as profitable for its mayor as humanly possible, Steyn had no end in sight to earnings within his unsavory empire. It would seem, however, that his cup runneth over when a mysterious individual approached him for a possible business offer. Known only as Mr. Fox, and revealing himself as a member of Caesar's Legion, Fox presented an offer of 8,000 caps for Steyn's cooperation, so that the Legion could use Nipton as a trap to capture both Powdergangers and the NCR's personnel. The offer felt like a dream come true to Steyn, who sought to use the caps as a means to continue his political career back at his home in the hub. Due to the questionable ethics of such an agreement, Steyn decided that it was a good time to also create various stashes of supplies should he begin collecting too many enemies in either direction. Several of these stashes can still be found across the Nipton area, alongside one of Steyn's own entries documenting these events.
I can hardly believe my luck. Literally, I'm agape. Just now I was approached by a rather intense young man calling himself Mr. Fox. Yeah, right. When we were alone in my office, he let it be known that he is a member of Caesar's Legion. He knew that NCR troops and Powdergangers often spend time in Nipton. It turns out that the Legion hates and wishes to make an example of both groups. The NCR for obvious reasons, and Powdergangers for harassing Legion raiding parties on this side of the river. I didn't have to think a moment about Mr. Fox's proposition before accepting it. All I have to do is convince the Powders to kidnap the NCR troops at night. When both groups are in town, the Legion boys will scoop everyone up. Ha! For this simple task, I've been offered 8,000 caps. I could almost go back to the NCR right away, but who knows how much else I might make off this Legion lackey. I'm going to start stockpiling some supplies in a safe house between here and the Mojave outpost, just in case I decide to head back home in a hurry. Very exciting.
Steyn would make the arrangements quickly for Powdergangers to kidnap NCR soldiers the day of Mr. Fox's planned operations to begin. It was a perfect plan in the mayor's eyes to get both parties involved outside of their agreed-to terms to utilize Nipton's services. What Steyn didn't realize, however, was that this decision wouldn't just bring harm to the NCR and the Powdergangers. It would turn all of Nipton into a war zone. Mr. Fox, of course, was an alias the entire time he had been working with Nipton's mayor, and he was actually known as Vulpes Inculta, the highest-ranking frumentari within Caesar's Legion. This elite group acted as a scouting arm of the faction, individuals who were highly skilled infiltrators that could enter society unnoticed and attempt to disrupt their enemies within the New Vegas region. The official spies of Caesar himself acted as his top intelligence officers, and would be his primary hand in initiating intimidation through strategic acts of terror. What Mayor Steyn didn't truly understand was that agreeing to work with Vulpes Inculta was a mistake of the highest order. What Steyn was never aware of was that Caesar's legion had targeted Nipton specifically to make an example of its entire population, as they had observed the town's behavior as a facilitator of society's worst vices. And what that meant to the legion was to course-correct Nipton in a way so abominable that it would send shockwaves across the entirety of the Mojave Wasteland. The impending message would be clear. No one under the protection of the new California Republic would be safe from the reach of Caesar's legion, and Vulpes Inculta planned a sick and unique way to ensure the lesson would not be soon forgotten. The Frumentarii are truly horrific harbingers of justice for Caesar, experiencing specific training to be allowed a level of autonomy to operate outside of the legion's larger ranks. Vulpes Inculta had already been known for his cruelty and violent punishments towards the legion's enemies, and was so prolific by the time of their arrival in the Mojave Wasteland that he was known as a relative celebrity within the faction. His plans for Nipton were truly iconic and equally horrific, as he'd rely on Steyn to bring them the NCR and powder gangers on a platter, while his men rounded up all of Nipton's remaining residents. From here, all of the captured parties would be entered into a lottery of his design, a large part of Nipton's long history, but only its top 2 winners would survive, while every other participant would face 3 possibilities: enslavement, crucifixion, or immediate death through various means. As the residents and kidnapped individuals slowly learned their fate, Vulpes Inculta claims that they stood by and watched as each individual was dealt their punishment. There could be some debate to be had from this information, as dead legionnaires can be found in Nipton's ruins. But it's clear that the Legion's sense of justice was felt by everyone within Nipton's population, and upon the courier's arrival, there are still many crucified under the hot Mojave sun, and others can be found displayed in increasingly more violent ways. Mayor Steyn, however, would earn one of the most notable punishments across all those discovered in the fire and ashes of the day's massacre, as upon drawing a losing ticket, he would be burned alive on a pile of tires, joining many of the dead found throughout the day's violence. While Inculta decided that the largest contingent of Nipton would lose their lives the same day, the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st place winners of the lottery would not know their prizes until the punishments were handed down. Those in the 3rd place camp faced immediate enslavement and were taken to a local raid camp, while the 2nd place winner, named Boxcars, would have his legs broken with hammers. And he can still be found in the town's general store, where he'll describe the horror he experienced. The 1st place winner, a powder ganger by the name of Oliver Swanek, was entirely spared, but based on his introduction upon the player reaching what's left of Nipton, he's clearly psychologically broken from the experience, despite his elation at being the only untouched survivor. The courier can still speak to Vulpes Inculta should he still be alive by the events of Nipton's destruction, and asks that they spread the word of the downfall of a population supposedly under the protection of the NCR. With their judgment officially cast on the town's people, the Legion leaves for their base at Fortification Hill. What always stuck with me while playing this game is that the residents of New Vegas are clearly shaken by the events of Nipton's fall, and the passing conversations one could witness with numerous NPCs and named characters adds a level of immersion that can't be ignored. Immediately, the nearby Mojave outpost notices the black smoke that's observable across the desert skies. The iconography of the events is haunting, and while players are intimidated by many hostile NPCs across the franchise's history, there's something about Vulpes Inculta's words that hit differently, given that there are literal people nailed to crosses when you walk through Nipton's ruins. What's important to realize, however, is that this event in Fallout's history is important for several reasons. One, it displays the sheer cruelty that's possible from the minds of Caesar's Legion, as its Frumentarii are given an immense level of freedom in how they deliver justice to their enemies, and the lottery's purpose and execution is clearly from the mind of a twisted person. They're a systemic piece of the Caesar's Legion and their training, as similar massacres were delivered across campaigns in Arizona and nearby areas. There's something to consider, however, in the writing of New Vegas, in the level of deception and manipulation that Inculta is capable of, as you could easily take his words for face value, that Nipton's residents sat idle as they watched their neighbors meet their fates, But despite the unsavory practices of many of the town's residents, the evidence of them not accepting their fates still remains, as dead prospectors and townspeople clearly went down fighting. The gaslighting by Inculta, however, is a critical piece worth acknowledging, as the Frumentari are functionally literal terrorists, and their messaging needs to invoke the highest levels of unease possible. The justification given by Inculta to take down Nipton is also in itself a piece of misinformation, as from all indicators, it was its mayor all along who was likely the worst offender of its residents. When looking at the communications and documentation left behind, it was Steyn who called the shots, and only his direction that allowed the Legion to infiltrate this location and ultimately its end fate. Overall, however, the atrocities witnessed at Nipton truly encapsulate the horrors of humanity within Fallout's universe. And while the amount of deaths may not be as large in number as the Great War itself, it represents the areas of the franchise that remind you that some of the worst monsters aren't infected with the forced evolutionary virus or some form of radiation. It's how humans treat other humans that often gives us the most pause. And with that, we thank you for joining us as we explored the Massacre at Nipton in Fallout New Vegas. What were your feelings about this event in the 2010 game? Let us know in the comments. For more content behind the lore of Fallout and its many topics, check out our Fallout Stories playlist and additional videos listed here, where we cover weekly content from the franchise. As always, Wastelanders, keep on dissecting. Thank you for watching. This is Mark signing off.